Welcome everyone to a webinar today on helping children and families claim the 2021 expanded child tax credit. This webinar, as you can see, well, actually, let's go to the next slide. This webinar today is sponsored by 4 organizations in New York State: the Schuyler Center for Analysis and Advocacy, the Citizens Committee for the Children of New York, the Children's Agenda up in the Rochester area, and the Westchester Children's Association. All 4 of these partner organizations that are sponsoring this event are multi-issue child advocacy organizations, and they're all members of the Partnership for America's Children. Next slide, please. This webinar is being sponsored by 2 organizations. One is the Coalition of Human Needs, an alliance of national groups of service providers, faith groups, policy experts, and other advocates with the mission of advocating at the federal level to meet the needs of people with low incomes. Next slide, please. And the other organization that is sponsoring it is my organization, the Partnership for America's Children. We have over 50 members that are multi-issue child advocacy organizations in 40 states. And our mission is to support our network of state and community child advocacy organizations in effective advocacy. And I'm pleased to say that today I can see that we have Allison Lake, who is both the executive director of the Westchester Children's Association and actually sits on the partnership board. And Allison, I would be delighted if you're interested to welcome everybody to have you unmuted so that you can say a few words. Zoe, do you want to unmute Allison? Allison, would you like to say a few words about why you're sponsoring this? And no is okay. You don't have to do that.
Sorry, I was hitting unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Lake from WCA. Appreciate the partnership and the Human Needs Alliance for putting this together. I think it's a very important topic in work, and I hope we have a lot of good Westchester partners on, as well as those from around the state. And just looking forward to learning right alongside you. So thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm the director of the Partnership for America's Children. I've been doing this work for more than 35 years, and I'm the first director of the partnership. And our goal really is to support our members so that they can fight for the children in your state and in states across the country. Next slide. The second speaker from this team or partnership that the partnership has with the Coalition on Human Needs will be Alini De Fonseca, who is our child tax credit outreach coordinator at the Coalition on Human Needs. But she actually comes from New York State and had worked in East Harlem for over 7 years, supporting public housing residents and then in the aging services in East Harlem. Next slide, please. So let's talk first about what is this expanded child tax credit that we're hoping you will help families claim. Next slide. The American Rescue Plan that was actually passed, I believe, a year ago this week, expanded the child tax credit just for 1 year, for the tax year of 2021, and it did it in 3 ways. And I'll explain those in a moment, but what you need to know is that that expanded credit, if we reach all the families that are entitled to claim it, can cut the number of children living in poverty by about 40%. At least as important, it can also help lift children out of deep poverty. So even though they're still poor, they are much less poor than they would otherwise be. And so that's about 1.1 million children it can lift to above half the poverty line. But families aren't claiming this. We'll talk about why. And you can really help them claim that full credit. You don't need to be a tax expert to do it. You do need to understand who's eligible and make sure they get the help they need to file a tax claim. Next slide, please. So as I said, the child tax credit was expanded in 3 ways. The first, and the part that got the most attention, is that families could get half of the credit in advance in monthly payments. And so there was a lot of press coverage starting in July of 2021 saying that families were going to get monthly payments. And in fact, most families did start getting it automatically. They still have to file a tax return in this year for the tax year 2021 to get the second half of the credit. Families that didn't get any of the credit last year can get the full credit if they didn't get advance payments, so long as they file a tax return. The second way it was expanded, which really didn't get as much attention, is that the amount of the credit was nearly doubled. So instead of being $2,000 per child for 2021, it's $3,600 per child for kids age 0 to 5 and $3,000 per child ages 6 through 17. That ends up being significantly more money for low-income families. And the third way that it got changed for 2021 is that there's no minimum earned income requirement. So families without any earned income at all, families that were getting by on employment benefits or on Social Security or on Social Security disability, can now get the full credit. And of course, a lot of those families assume that because they had no earned income and because they weren't eligible in past years, they can't get it. They need to understand that they can, in fact, receive this credit. It's also what we call fully refundable, which means that they can get the full amount of the credit even if they don't owe a penny in taxes. So families that had absolutely no earned income can end up getting a significant amount of money back from the IRS. Next slide, please. Here's an example. Take a family with one adult, a 4-year-old child, a 13-year-old child, and a 15-year-old child. For the 2021 tax credit, that family could get almost $10,000. But in addition, this is a family, quite possibly, that didn't get their stimulus payments, and they may be eligible for an earned income tax credit. It's pretty easy to find a family that with 2 or 3 children is suddenly eligible, well, 3 or 4 children is suddenly eligible for $20,000 for year 2021. Imagine what kind of difference that can make to a child that's living in poverty or even deep poverty. Next slide. So why are children missing out on this? Because there's about 4 million children or more that may not get any of the child tax credit payments. These are families that have never or not recently filed taxes, and they also didn't claim the economic stimulus payment for various reasons. And so the IRS didn't know who they were, that they had children, or how to pay the advance credit to them. And they didn't know they were eligible, so they didn't take the extra step that they could have back in 2021 and filed online in what we call a non-filer portal to claim it. This has particularly important implications for Black and Latinx kids. They were disproportionately excluded from getting the full child tax credit before, and right now they're still more likely to miss out on it. We did a lot of research on why these families had not claimed it. We conducted a number of focus groups, and the research informs everything that I'm going to share with you about why families didn't claim it and what messages will persuade them to do it. One of the things that we learned in our focus groups is that trusted community organizations can persuade these families that they are in fact eligible for this credit and that they'll trust you enough to take the next steps to investigate and file for the credit. And I want to make sure you understand that you don't have to be a tax expert to do this. You need to know who's eligible and steer them to the tax experts who can help them file. Next slide, please. So, which families are in fact eligible? Next slide. These are the things that a family has to have to be eligible. First of all, they have to have a Social Security number. The adult has to either have a Social Security number or what's called an ITIN, an Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. That means the adult does not have to be documented if they're an immigrant. They can be an undocumented immigrant and they can still claim the credit so long as the child has a Social Security number. Any child born in this country can have a Social Security number. The child in question that they're claiming the credit for must be the taxpayer's child, which can include adopted children, grandchild or stepchild, younger sibling, step sibling, half sibling, or their descendant. So there has to be this close family bond that's spelled out, or it can be a foster child that was placed with the person filing the tax form by a government agency. The child has to have lived with the adult in the US for more than half the year, 6 months and a day, which I'm afraid means that all the Afghan refugees are not eligible. And they can't have been supporting themselves. They cannot have provided more than half of their own support. If they make these 4 tests, that family can claim the child tax credit for that child. Next slide, please. As I said before, most families automatically got the advanced child tax credit. They had filed tax returns in 2019 or 2020, or they claimed the economic stimulus payment. The IRS knew where they lived, had bank account information for them in most cases, knew who was in the family, that they had eligible children, and the IRS paid those the advanced part of the tax credit automatically. But families who had not filed a tax return and hadn't claimed the economic stimulus payment needed to take a step to receive the advance payment, and most of those families didn't. They could have gone online to use this electronic filing portal for non-filers, and they chose not to. Whether families claimed the child tax credit in 2021 to get the advance portion or not, everybody has to file a tax return this year to get the second half. And if they didn't get the first half already, they can get the full amount by filing a tax return. So the bottom line is, for families to get this credit, what they need to do is file a tax return. But they don't necessarily know that, and they don't know how to get help filing them. Next slide, please. So I want to take you quickly through the timeline on this, because you're probably thinking, wow, April 15th is coming up fast and they don't have a lot of time to do this. But in fact, they have a lot more time, and you have a lot more time to engage them in it. Tax filing season began January 24th, and the VITA sites, which are volunteer income tax assistance sites, opened and are still open, and they all stay open through April 18th, which is the tax filing day this year. Anybody who is legally required to file by April 18th has to file by April 18th or file a request for an extension. But anybody whose income is below the filing requirements doesn't have to meet that deadline. They can file anytime during the year. And those income limits very roughly are about $12,500 for a single person or head of household, and about $25,000 for a married couple. So there are plenty of families that have earned income but don't file taxes because they're not required to, that can file a tax form anytime during 2022. But it's also true that even if they didn't file a tax return, and even if they didn't ask for a formal extension, and you can get an automatic extension, they still can go ahead and file later, and they won't even pay a penalty unless they owed taxes. Because when you request an extension, you're supposed to pay what you owe at that point. But the families we're trying to reach are all due refunds, so they're not going to have a penalty to pay. So as a practical matter, while we certainly would like to connect everybody with VITA sites immediately so they can put in their tax return and get the money in hand right away, we can keep working to get families to claim their tax credit throughout 2022. Now, the next important date after that is probably May. That's when the IRS, in partnership with a group called Code for America, is going to open up a website, getctc.org. And that website is what we call a simplified online filing portal. People who are not required to file a tax return can go on that portal and put in pretty minimal amounts of documentation. It's really pretty easy to use compared to filing a full tax return, and get the child tax credit and potentially that third economic stimulus payment. Ideally, every family would file a full tax return, because remember, they can also get the earned income tax credit if they're eligible for it, and potentially some other refundable credits. But even if they don't have the paperwork or can't, don't want to do that, they can still use this online filing portal so long as their income is low enough, and at least get the child tax credit. And that filing portal will stay open until late 2022. They haven't set an exact date, but I would expect it to be sometime in November this year. Next slide, please. So filing taxes, that can be pretty scary for all of us. And people don't know how to do it. But the important thing for you to know is you don't have to be a tax expert. You don't have to talk them through how to do it. You need to steer them to these VITA sites that I was talking about. And there are several ways to get them the help they need. The first is you can go on a website called getyourrefund.org, where there literally is a list of all the local VITA sites, and you can find the one near the person you're trying to help, and encourage them to schedule an appointment with that VitaSite. You want to make sure that they schedule it before they go. And if they're a married couple, you really want them both to be able to go to the appointment, because tax returns, if they're filing jointly, need to be signed by both of them. So you want to encourage them, one option is to help them make an appointment to go up in person to a VitaSite and get the help they need. And in a moment, I'll show you where to find a list of the documents they need to bring. But there are three other ways really, that they can get the help they need to file. One is that same website, getyourrefund.org. For people who are comfortable doing this, can go online and use free do-it-yourself tax filing software, much like you or I might pay to buy that software. And the website even has a chat function where if you have questions as you work your way through the software, it'll answer the questions. And for people who are comfortable working online, that can be a really good way for them to file their tax. The second way that this website can help people file a full tax return is they can connect them with a VitaSite staff online, virtually, so they don't have to go in. They need to be able to upload their documents so that the VitaSite tax specialist that they're working with can see them, and then they can talk with the tax specialist over the phone. And the final way that getyourrefund.org can connect them to tax help is if they decide that these are not the right approaches and they want to use that online simplified portal to just claim the CTC, they can sign up and they'll get a notice when getctc.org opens in May of 2022. So there are lots of ways you can connect them with tax help so that they can get that return filed. Next slide, please. Now, there are other free tax help available. The AARP Foundation has a tax aid site which provides both in-person and virtual tax assistance, very like the VitaSites. They focus on people who are over 50 or who have low to moderate incomes. And the other kind of help is a little different. They don't help you file a tax return, but for people who have problems with their tax return, these organizations, low-income taxpayer clinics, can help them resolve the problem. A very common one with the child tax credit is that people will file a tax return and be told by the IRS that somebody else already claimed that child for the tax credit. A low-income taxpayer clinic can help them resolve that and establish that they're the person the child spent most of the year with, and they're the ones eligible to claim that child as and get the credit. Next slide, please. It is also true that even with all these wonderful resources, some people are going to be unable to get a VitaSite appointment and decide it's worth paying for paid tax services. We really prefer that they go to the free sites. Those are highly qualified, trained professionals. And there are some issues with some paid professionals, frankly, there have been problems with. But we can understand why, if that's the only way families can get the help and there's so much money coming back to them, they may choose a paid preparer. If families want to do that, we encourage you to give them this link, which is a really pretty good list from the IRS of how to find a reputable paid tax preparer so that they don't get ripped off. There's really no other way to put it. Next slide, please. I am now going to stop talking, and I'm going to invite 3 of our guest speakers to talk to you about accessing volunteer income tax assistance in New York. And we are going to start with Rudy Akins, who's a VitaSite coordinator at Westcott. And after that, we're going to hear from Andrew Kochian, who is with another Vita program coordinator at United Way of the Greater Capital Region. And then Leanie Jacobs is going to follow up, and she's with the United Way of Westchester and Putnam. So I think we're going to turn off the slides for a moment so you can actually see our speakers' faces as they talk. And then we'll go back to the slides later. So there we go.
Good evening, everyone. And Deborah, thank you. You did a wonderful job, okay, in explaining everything in relation to the VITA or the expanded child tax credit. Excuse me, let me get some water here. My organization, Westcott, provides other services for individuals of low income, and tax preparation is one of them. And we have been doing it with the county and partnering with the county for the last well, 14 years at least, okay? And in relation to the program, the VITA program is identically set up for everything that you talked about and helping those individuals who meet certain guidelines, income guidelines, to help them to get the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, dependent care credit, okay? And coming in, first they need to make an appointment, and we use 211 to do that. And 211 kind of like let them know what they need to bring, documentation, things of that nature, to make sure they're income eligible, so no time will be wasted. So that when they get here and we review certain things and look at to see what their incomes are, and now the documentation for all the children, okay, themselves and the children, okay, and the ages, because it's very important, because in some situations, things do change. I have had customers who are returned customers, and I've seen their children grow, and now their children come by and come get their taxes done too. And so by word of mouth, how this agency, how the VITA sites have permeated throughout the community. And it's very important, again, the whole sole purpose of that is for us to understand what credits they're eligible for, okay, for their particular children. Social securities are very important in order to get a full complement of the credits, like the earned income tax credit, child tax credit, child tax credit, additional child tax credit, and dependent care, okay? But if you have an I-10, okay, you're only eligible to get child tax credit and dependent care, okay, as well too. The things that changed for 2021, again, as Deborah mentioned, the fact that the income, that being income driven, and the individuals who are eligible, okay, can come in, okay, and have their taxes done in order to get the certain stimulus or other credits that they can get for their children as well too. And again, some people don't know because again, don't have the means to, or the information is not getting out to them. So my organization, based on being a community action program and their customers, they kind of like share that information with them and hope by word of mouth to get to the community. But the county advertises, if you have a copy of the flyer that promotes that and tell you the sites, the eligibility and things of that nature. So to continue to do that, okay, but there are some constraints in listening to some of the taxpayers or so, because there's issues as well too, and those are family issues or so, where a domestic or family situation, and someone else claims the child before the primary custodial person can get access to come in and do the taxes so they can get the credit. So those are some hindrances, some other issues as well too, based on the population that you're serving, okay. But I have seen the changes based on, as you mentioned, the ages, again, under 25, 3,600 and over, the increase from $2,000 to $3,000. And now it used to stop at age 17. They're allowing you to now, if you are 17, turning 17 on December 31st of 2021, you're eligible. Okay, so that means it doesn't stop. You're eligible for the child tax credit, or the credit. Also, individuals who are 19, which is a change as well too, because you had to be 19 and living with the parents and going to school, or up to 24 if you want to get other credits like the earned income tax credit. But now they're allowing the 19-year-olds who are not being claimed by anyone, who are working, who are now able to get certain benefits or so. And those benefits in this case is that they can get earned income tax credit, then they also can get the stimulus as well too. So there's a plethora of certain credits that individuals can get, but they need to know based on their filing status, their income, okay, what they're eligible for. So the main thing is to try to get that information out and get people to come in. And I know for some, from my own experience, it's a trust issue or so. And again, once you establish that with them, okay, and because we see all kinds, it's a free service. They come in and call shopping, right? They want to see what they're going to get and then see whether or not they can go down the street somewhere and get more. But unfortunately, if they go out to the pay prepared, they're just going to be taken advantage of. Okay, so we try to emphasize that it's your money, keep it. You worked hard for that. And the little $200, $300 that you are going to give up for a return, that can pay a bill, that could put groceries in. So we solely emphasize that for that population. But the main thing from my experience is they're going to trust in them and knowing that they're going to get an accurate return. So the certification that we go through to the advanced level, the quality review that we do in order to make sure that we are preparing an accurate return. Our percent rate over the years is 1% to 2%. Okay, your allowance is 10%, but we are down in the low percentile. And I look at it like this: 1% maybe a new volunteer error, but the other percent is based on taxpayers not being full diligence in telling us or having all their documents. Okay, but from my experience, the family, the faces and the things that I see and how they benefit from this, and especially during these particular times that we've been experiencing for the last couple of years, and how it is welcomed and most needed, okay, to help them supplement their budgets, okay, more so than their income, but their budgets, okay, so that they're able to, be able to provide, some food substance and things of that nature. And this is an opportunity, to provide this free service to this community or population. If there's any questions, I know y'all said you'll table that to after, afterward or so, but if there's any questions later that I can answer specifically, I welcome them.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thank you. So yeah, I represent VITA sites in the counties, including Albany, and all the counties, in and around Albany. So like Rensselaer, Saratoga, etc. Our VITA sites this year, some of them are in person. So when you make an appointment, you will actually be in person with the volunteers, or some of our sites are actually virtual. So as was mentioned before, you would go on to get your refund, scan in your documents that way, and everything is done virtually. Or some sites have a hybrid combination. So you would drop off your tax documents with the site, and then volunteers at the site would do the returns there and then have you come back either later that day or like in possibly a week. Now, as was mentioned before, all of our volunteers get certified every year. This year specifically, we are certified specifically in the child tax credit and all the new rules with it. Of course, with the earned income credit, the daycare credit. So our volunteers are certified and we are ready to go to file taxes for people where the child tax credit is going to impact them very greatly. Now, in our area here, the most people, in order to make an appointment with one of our sites, they're going to call the number 211. Now, some sites in our areas, you will be able to make an appointment right there through 211, because those sites have chosen to sign up with 211 to book appointments that way. Other sites, 211 will refer you to the agency's phone number, and then you go through them and make your appointments through them. So it's going to vary per site, but in general, we tell people call 211 basically as a good starting place in order to do that. Now, as of right now, Albany County and Saratoga really are the two counties that, as of this date, have the most open appointment slots at this point. That may change as we go through March, but if you're looking to get an appointment specifically in either Albany or Saratoga, there are still appointment slots left. Other counties, there might be, again, just call 211 and ask, if there's a VITA site that's closest to you, they may be open, or 211 may refer you to somewhere a little farther out. Okay. Now, it's important before you go to your appointment that you make sure you have all your tax documents ready. That way there's no delays, you don't have to come back, everything is done, in one go. So primarily what's very, very important is to bring your social security card, if you have one. Okay, if you don't have a social security card, a I-10 letter or an I-10 card, that'll work in place of that. If you receive social security benefits and you get that pink box form, as I like to call it, the SSA 1099, that can work in place of a social security card. But in general, we have to see documentation from the Social Security Administration that has your name and number on it. So again, primarily that's your social security card or the SSA 1099 pink box form. That's primary number one document everyone has to bring in. That's IRS rules. We have to confirm everyone's identity because identity theft is, of course, a major issue these days. It's very, very important. You have to bring that in. Of course, it's very important to bring in all your tax documentation, all your income documents like W-2s. If you received unemployment, that goes on a 1099-G. The New York State Department of Labor doesn't automatically send those out. You have to ask for it, basically. And most people that we've seen get it from their online Department of Labor account. Okay, but no matter what, if you received unemployment last year, we have to see that 1099-G tax form. And then all your other tax forms, pension forms, again, Social Security, all your tax documents, okay? We don't want you coming in and having to come back later. We want you to get you done right then and there. So very, very important to bring in your ID, Social Security, and all your tax documents. Specifically with the child tax credit, most people have gotten letters from the IRS stating how much in the advanced child tax credit they got in 2021, from July through December 2021. And it's a nice simple form. It shows you how much you got and how many kids were used to determine how much you got. So if you have that form, please bring it with you. It's very, very important. If you don't have the form, but you know exactly to the dollar how much in the child tax credit you received in 2021, our sites can accept that. But again, it's very important you know exactly how much you received. Because that way, when we file your return, you can get the other half of the child tax credit on your tax return, and it's going to be the correct amount. Okay, if there's any problems with the child tax credit in terms of what you're going to be getting, it's going to delay your refund for months, and you will not get the refund that you were expecting. So it's very important that you bring in that letter, that child tax credit letter, or again, if you don't know exactly how much you received. The same goes with the stimulus credit, or excuse me, the stimulus payment. So $1,400 last year, stimulus, most people received, and it's $1,400 for everyone that was on your 2020 tax return, mostly. Okay, so if it's just you yourself, it's $1,400. If you claimed you and one child, it should have been $2,800. Now, in my personal experience, a lot of people, or I should say several people, didn't get letters from the IRS stating they got the stimulus. So if you didn't get those letters, it's very, very important that you, or that the client, I should say, that the client knows how much they received. The best way to do that is to check their bank documents in March 2021, because that's when the stimulus came out. Okay, very, very important that even before they set foot in a VITA site, they know exactly how much they received in that stimulus. Because if they didn't get it, they can get it as an extra refund on their tax return. But if there's a discrepancy between what they say they didn't get, but the IRS is saying they actually did get in March, it's going to, once again, delay the processing of that really needed refund by months. Okay, so very, very important that clients come prepared to their appointment. Now, just to speak a little bit of my own personal experience with the child tax credit, this season I have seen clients come in and they've been getting like over $10,000 of the child tax credit. This is primarily for people who have really young children, especially children who were born last year. And it has dramatically impacted our clients' lives. I mean, they're using that to buy the essentials for themselves and their kids. So the credit I have seen personally, and I'm sure all the other site managers have seen personally, how this credit has really impacted people's lives. Like their eyes just light up when they see that refund number. So it's just a very, very good credit, and it has substantially changed people's lives. And again, our VITA sites are very prepared for these types of situations. One other thing I want to mention is that not necessarily every parent with young children are going to get thousands and thousands of dollars in refund. It's very important for clients to understand that how much you're going to get really depends on your situation. Okay, you may end up getting thousands and thousands of dollars extra because of this child tax credit, but I've personally seen, and I'm sure many other site managers have seen that, if you worked full time, let's say $30,000, $40,000 during the year, but you didn't have a lot of taxes taken out of your paychecks, you might still get a refund, and it might still be a significant refund, but it may not be as much as you've maybe seen your friends or your neighbors get. And the reason behind that is because you didn't have a lot of taxes, the client didn't have a lot of taxes taken out of their paychecks. So what the child tax credit is really doing is making up for the fact that you didn't have a lot of taxes taken out of your paychecks. So that's why some parents that I've seen, they were expecting more in a total refund, but they didn't get a large amount of refund because again, they didn't have a lot of taxes taken out of their paychecks, nor should they have, okay? Because, you don't want to, your clients don't want to give more taxes to the government than they should during the year. So it's just important for clients to understand that how much refund they're going to get during the year really depends person by person. Not exactly every parent of young kids is going to get thousands and thousands of dollars. So I think that's important to stress as well. So just in total, our volunteers are ready to go, certified. They know what they're doing. Clients should come prepared as best they can, and they should understand that not every client is going to get a gigantic refund. It really depends person to person. And in order to make an appointment, just please call 211. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lena?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lenny Jacob, Chief Information Referral Officer at the United Way's 211 helpline. I'm sure you just heard 211, which Andrew just mentioned. United Way's 211 helpline offers health and human services information, referral, assessment, and crisis support to help callers to find assistance they need. In addition to managing 211 core calls 24/7, we have partnership with the Westchester County to manage wider calls from Westchester County residents. We work very closely with the Victor's and Rudy's team. 211 is the starting point in Westchester for wider tax appointments. When a person dials 211, the first message they're going to hear is language option. We set it this way because we do not want to turn anyone away due to the language barrier. From there, callers will hear a dedicated option for tax appointment. We also have bilingual staff and also offer translation services offering over 200 languages. In addition to that, 211 staff is trained to provide callers, who need information, guidance, and assistance to obtain their CTC child tax credit payments. So if anyone looking for tax assistance, they can simply dial 211 and the staff will screen the caller and schedule appointment at the selected site if eligible for the program. Also, staff will remind callers on what documentation to bring when they go for the appointment. That's all from 211. I'll stop here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on now to talk about some of the reasons why families haven't claimed these. And we will answer questions. I see that at least one person had to leave. And anybody who has to leave but has a question, pop it in the chat and we'll make sure you get an email with the response later. Alini?
Okay, so thank you to all of our presenters. That was great information and hopefully helpful to anyone working with families and clients in New York. So now, actually I'll cover, I don't think we covered these slides yet, but I'll cover this quickly. So quickly, obtaining individual taxpayer identification numbers. I know there was one question about this in the chat specific to immigration. But for families to claim the CTC, dependents must have social security numbers. The parents and caregivers can have social security numbers or ITINs, but the children do have to have a social security. And to obtain an ITIN, individuals must submit Form W-7, proof of identity and foreign status documents with their tax returns. And it's typically a two-step process. So you have to prepare your ITIN application and then file the application with the tax return. So you can't just send the ITIN application separately. It has to, an ITIN application has to be submitted with an actual tax return. And to avoid having to mail in personal documents to get your ITIN, clients can be referred to IRS taxpayer assistance centers to get their copies certified. So at the center, they can get the copies certified, and then they'll have the application complete and they can take it to the VITA sites to file for their tax returns. These taxpayer assistance centers really don't do a lot of other stuff. And in fact, with the ITIN applications, they ask that the actual Form W-7 is completed ahead of time, and people just bring in their documents so that they can then be verified. And for a list for the Form W-7 and a list of required documents, that's a link where you can go. We'll also have all this information in our toolkit. And this is a link to the required documents you need to file taxes. We just got a lot of great info on that as well from our guest presenters, but this will also be available to you through our toolkit. And finally, the IRS letter 6419. This is the advanced CTC payments. This was also mentioned previously. So just reiterating, the IRS sent everyone a 6419 letter showing how much they got for the CTC. If the amount listed on the letter does not match what a family received, they should check their IRS online account. That's a link for it as well for up-to-date amount, and use that when they're filing their tax returns. And if anyone has questions on this, we can also discuss further during Q&A. So we wanted to also discuss some common barriers and concerns that came up. We had conducted a series of focus groups in this past fall of 2021, and these were with non-filers, and these were there were a variety of different concerns that came up and that might possibly also come up as you work with families and communities and helping them to access the CTC. And they include that families responded well to language emphasizing the CTC providing help for the whole family, not so much for messaging around findings about long-term benefits to children. They were cautious about overpromising. So that's just something good to know as you talk about the CTC with families. A lot of families didn't realize that the CTC was even expanded and that people who weren't eligible in the past now are. Many people believe that they had to work to get the credit. There was fear around having to pay the IRS back if they weren't entitled to the credit, fear around having owed back taxes, and also fear around losing their other benefits like SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, things like that. There were immigration concerns. There were a lot of concerns also around language barriers and access. There were questions about claiming a child born in 2021. So in 2021, the non-filer portal, you couldn't claim a child that was born in 2021, but you can now claim that child on a tax return for 2021. There were also concerns around difficulty getting through to the IRS if they had a question, and in general, a desire for in-person help. And again, a lot of these questions and concerns are addressed in our toolkit, including an FAQ that's pretty comprehensive and answers a lot of these questions and more. So one of the first questions, one of the first concerns, does receiving the CTC impact other public benefits? And the answer to that is no. Getting this credit will not change any federally funded public benefits that a family receives, like Social Security, SNAP, childcare subsidies, or WIC. Will an individual ever have to pay this money back? So the CTC is not a loan. If someone receives payments for a child who is no longer their dependent, they may have to pay that money back, but there are some protections for those with incomes below 40,000. This is 50,000 for heads of household, 60,000 for married couples. And there are more protections, but more limited protections for those with incomes that are a little higher. So below 80,000 for individuals or non-custodial parents, 100,000 single head of household, or 120,000 for couples filing jointly. And what if someone has not filed tax returns in recent years? So people with very low incomes are generally not required to file. We have the income thresholds there. So even if they were required to file, generally there's not a penalty if the IRS owes someone a refund, perhaps from something like the EITC. And taxpayers can file for the past 3 years to receive the refunds that are owed. So they can go back if someone hasn't filed for the last 3 years, they can go back 3 years to file to receive those refunds. And even if someone owes child support or back taxes, they can benefit from claiming the CTC. The credit will essentially go toward paying off the outstanding child support or taxes first, and then they'll receive any amount left over. And then if it all goes towards what is owed, that's going to reduce their debt. And it means that in the future, they can actually get tax credits when they do file their taxes. Will receiving the CTC affect someone's immigration status or ability to get a green card? The answer to that is no. Under the current law, receiving the CTC or other tax credits will not affect their immigration status, their ability to get a green card, or future immigration plans. Use of tax credit is not considered a public charge determination. And will the IRS share someone's immigration status with other government agencies? The answer to that is no. The IRS is forbidden to share an individual's tax information with other agencies. There are limited exceptions related to certain criminal investigations or to determine someone's tax liability. The IRS website has more information on that as well. And we recommend that if someone thinks that they are in some sort of situation that might apply to these limited exceptions, that they are referred to possibly a tax lawyer or the appropriate professional to help guide them through that. So this is a link to our resource toolkit. I will pop it in the chat once we're done, and that will also all be in our follow-up email. But a lot of the questions and concerns we just covered and more answers to them and resources can be found in our toolkit. So speaking about CTC outreach and what actually works, and this is a compilation of different information that that's been shared with us by partners and also from our own work. Outreach is best when it's integrated into existing programs and communications. So providing information on CTC where families and communities are already going for other services or receiving other communications from trusted sources. Families receive multilingual information. Families receiving multilingual information multiple times is also really helpful. Outreach must include clear referral info with different options for how people can ask questions or get tax prep. This specifically applies also as well to VITA information. It can be really helpful for a family as you're telling them about the CTC to also tell them about such things like a VITA site and where they can go and how they can get appointments. We just got a bunch of great information on that as well, specific to New York, and that can really help move families to the next step to going through the entire process of getting the CTC. Broad communication is most effective when paired with targeted outreach or follow-up. So communication with high volume of families while also connecting more deeply with those at risk of missing out on the CTC. And schools, districts, and government benefit agencies are among the most trusted sources of information for families. Also, text messages, for example, from schools or agencies have been especially effective, although robocalls, emails, and mailers can also be effective. In addition to hearing from trusted community messengers, families may need to hear from tax, immigration, or family law experts as well for more specific answers to their questions. And we've identified 2 different levels of effective outreach. Level 1 is centered around raising awareness, and level 2 is centered around deeper engagement with families that really specifically providers and more on the ground staff can really take a big part in doing so. So here's an example of level 1 outreach activities. So these are 2 sample texts from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities that could be sent out via text, robocalls, or even emails. These scripts are also available in our toolkits. Sorry, hold on, I can't. Let me just close this. You can also record a hold message or video message for waiting room or office screens where if you already have this, you can just replace with a script like this or implement one so that people can hear this regularly when they're coming in contact with your organization of resources. Additionally, hang posters in waiting rooms and other public spaces and distribute flyers and send home flyers and backpacks when possible. We know a lot of organizations and agencies already engage in this as well. In our toolkit, we're providing a lot of different flyers in multiple languages. These are just 2 examples of them, but they're ready to be used and distributed out to communities and families to help with outreach. And adding CTC related questions to existing intake forms. So provide intake workers with local VITA numbers as we've done, or flyers to provide to families who may be eligible, and adding flyers or FAQs to resources already going out to families. So this is a partial screenshot of the FAQ you'll find in our toolkit. I actually also included an additional flyer from Victor and Rudy in the chat on their resources as well. That you can check out. And we're partners have relationships with state and local benefit agencies or school districts, encouraging them to send out mass communications to beneficiaries, families about the CTC and where they can get help. I mentioned a little while ago that these are really trusted sources, and combining outreach and messaging around CTC with the trust that families and communities have with these agencies can be really helpful. And also sending out a message in regular newsletters or posts on social media. These are different social media posts from a partner toolkit that we've used in the past. And speaking of level 2 outreach activities, so one of the things that's recommended is holding a phone bank or conducting peer-to-peer texting. Also, when possible and available, hosting a Q&A with a tax specialist, immigration attorney, or other subject matter expert. And we all know this can be held in person via Zoom or on Facebook Live, and can be really useful, especially since we got some of that feedback about more in-person or more personal access for families can be really helpful in guiding them through the process. And helping families schedule VITA appointments. Again, that's why we were happy to have VITA representatives on this call, so you can get direct information that you can pass along to families as well, and where they can go and how they can get help. Working in collaboration with local tax sites and partners to make tax prep services accessible. So helping to coordinate language interpretation, childcare appointments, transportation to tax sites when possible, and organizing tax filing or document preparation events. So where possible, working with VITA volunteers or local universities or other tax specialist volunteers to host events that can help prepare and get information out to families. And this is a list of the different sorts of resources that are in our toolkit. That's the link. Again, I'm going to share that with you in the chat so everybody will have access to that. Our toolkit is a living, breathing document, so we're constantly updating, adding resources that are helpful and useful as more of them come in. And this, you can sign up for our child tax credit email list. I will also be sharing this with you. Through our email list, we send updates on any trainings like this one that are open to the public, as well as updates we have for our toolkit and any other child tax credit updates that we think are important to get out to the larger community. And if you're interested, Deb earlier talked about get your refund. You can actually request a unique URL to help you track with outreach activities. So, and if anyone is interested in how or what people are accessing, specifically through Get Your Refund, you could get a URL and be able to see exactly who's using what in your community and what people are most interested in ways of getting help. If you're interested in that, you can email me and I can help you request that URL. And now we will open up to Q&A. Also, as you're thinking of your questions, I know we already have some in the chat as well. Zoe is going to pop in a poll, a couple of just quick questions that you can answer around outreach. There it is right there. And if you could just take a moment to answer those questions, just for us to get a gauge on what's useful, especially as we continue to do this outreach. And I think that is it. We'll give you a minute to do that, and then we'll move over to questions and answers.
Great. And we will share those answers in a moment. The other thing that we'd love it if you would pop in the chat at some point is what organization you're with and how many families you might be trying to reach out to, so that we have a sense of, you know, what the impact of our webinar today might be. While people are responding to the poll questions, actually, let me just give you a minute to read them, and then I'm going to answer Martha's question about people who are undocumented and haven't worked. But let's just give people a moment to answer the poll first. So, looks like a lot of you have chosen not to answer the poll, which is certainly your prerogative. I'll leave it up for just another moment or two, because now we're getting more. Let me explain. Martha had a question, and it's actually two, it's actually kind of unrelated questions, although for some people they're related. This was the question about how undocumented people who haven't worked all year can claim the tax credit. So there's two separate pieces. The first is that undocumented people can file tax returns. And in fact, literally millions of undocumented people in this country file tax returns every year. They do that because even though they are not documented, they are legally required to file a tax return if they have earnings over the requirement amount. And that is why they can file a tax return using the ATIN rather than a social security number. And there is a slide in our presentation that tells people how to do that. And they can do that and be pretty confident that that is not going to cause problems for them with the IRS, because as Alini said, that information, their tax filing is confidential, and the IRS doesn't release that to the Immigration Service. They have very, very limited circumstances under which they will release information about somebody's tax filings. So the first answer is you can be undocumented and file a tax return. The second is, remember I said that you can claim this tax credit even if you don't have a penny in earnings, because it's what's called fully refundable. Anybody who didn't work all year, and that might be because they were unemployed because they were an immigrant and they didn't have access to jobs during the pandemic, or it might be for any one of a number of other reasons. They might have been disabled, they might be a senior citizen who's retired, can still file a tax return and get the child tax credit refunded to them. This is kind of a hard concept for some people to understand. If I don't pay taxes, how am I getting a tax refund? And that's because the credit is payable to them even if they don't pay taxes, and that's what we mean by refundable. And you can now understand why it's a little hard. I'm so sorry, Marcia, you're right. It was Keisha and not you. It's hard for people to understand that they might not have a penny in earnings and still need to file a tax return and benefit from filing a tax return. And that's where you, as an organization, as a person working in an organization that they know and trust, can really help these families. You can explain to them that, yes, indeed, even though you didn't have earnings, even though you're undocumented, even though you didn't pay any taxes and you weren't required to file a tax return, you're better off if you file a tax return, because you're going to get this child tax credit paid back to you, and that's going to really help you and your children. And so, you know, that was one of the big barriers that we found when we did our focus groups, was people really just didn't know that the credit had been changed and that they could now get the money paid to them. And that's where your role becomes so critical. And, you know, it's a little hard, I think, at first to wrap your brains around this idea of getting money refunded to you when you didn't pay any taxes, but that's what this child tax credit does. And if there was more to your question, Keisha, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it out loud. I'm taking a look in the chat box to see if there were other questions that we haven't answered. I do want to talk a little bit about the domestic violence situation. Once they've filed a tax return and they've discovered that someone else claimed the child, they really should go to those low-income tax centers, taxpayer assistance centers, I forget, LITCs, for help. Because the VITA sites help them prepare the returns, but those other centers help them when there's a problem after the return is filed. It's obviously very scary for someone who has been the victim of domestic violence to try to get their credit. But we've talked at length with a woman who for many, many years was the taxpayer advocate within the IRS and now has founded her own nonprofit. And she assures us that they have very strict protections that are designed to make sure that families, you know, that the information from one taxpayer doesn't get sent to the other so that they don't inadvertently disclose confidential information. So somebody who's been the victim of domestic violence and now is trying to get the credit that really is due to them can submit information to the IRS, and information that they submit about where they're living will not be sent to the other person who's claiming that child. So there is in fact an avenue for getting help, and that's the one that we recommend. I also want to note that I think it's Martha put a comment. Yes, Martha put a comment in the chat, which is accurate, totally accurate, that filing taxes is a good thing if there's future immigration reform because it helps undocumented people adjust their status to a documented one because it shows they're in compliance with the tax laws. We also learned on the last webinar that we did about this with some other VITA site staff that another good reason to have people go to a VITA site and file a full tax return is because it helps protect them from identity theft within the IRS. If they get their tax filing in first, they'll get the credit that's due to them, and somebody who might have gotten their social security number and tried to file a fraudulent claim won't get the credit returned to them. And so that's another reason why it's really good for people to get in there and file their tax returns. And you know, people find it a little daunting, but there are lots of reasons why this in fact is really a good thing for them to do. We are past the hour. I don't see any more questions. I do want to ask our speakers from the 3 VITA programs if you have any final words before we log out.
No, this is very informative. And thank everyone for their shares and their comment as well too. And I agree with several things that were said in relation to, you know, the expanded child tax credit and how to get that and how to protect yourself and things of that nature, and how they come to trust individuals at the VITA site to help them. You know, in some cases, I've had individuals coming in with someone else's social, and I fill out a W-7 for them and file their taxes so they can get an I-10. So there's a plethora, a lot of things that I've seen in this process to help them, and how they, you know, rely on that and that trust that you build with them as well too. And again, for those individuals that, you know, get an I-10, whatever they report, once they do become for the future, if they become a citizen, it'd be rolled over. Medicare Social Security can be rolled over into their new social. Okay, so those are some of the selling points for individuals who have an I-10.
Yeah, and I will also say that, you know, across the 5 counties here, and I'm sure, you know, most VITA sites in the state, a lot of the clients that come to us are repeat clients that have been coming to us for years and years and years, maybe even decades.
Mm-hmm.
And that speaks to the trust that our clients put in us. So if your agencies, are looking to refer your clients to Vita sites, just know that, we are prepared, we are trusted, and we know what we're doing. Thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you both. Oh,
Thank
Lenny,
Lenny, did you want to say anything, Lenny?
No, I think the last comment is if you're looking for tax assistance, dial 211. We are here to help.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Zoe, did you share the poll results? I realized I don't remember if you did that. Let's share those results so everybody can see them, because we ended up with 17 respondents. This is really exciting. We had half the people on this call are already engaging in child tax credit outreach. 5 of them are not, but we also have 4 people who were not, but will now consider it. So that's really wonderful for us to know. And also people find the flyers and the posters and the social posts particularly helpful. That's wonderful, but we do encourage you to also think about whether you can do things like change them, from music to a comment about the child tax credit on your phone wait line and things like that. There's some really simple things you can do that will also help with the outreach. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and we appreciate you joining us.
And thank you all as well, too. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting us, and of course, we will work together. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Victor.
Bye-bye.